Coming up, a conversation with Michael Pierson, Democratic candidate for Colorado State House District 22, on making democracy work.
You're listening to Studio 809 Podcasts, the cure for common apathy and indifference. Reported side effects include a sense of being informed and engaged. Ask your doctor if Studio 809 is right for you.
Welcome to Making Democracy Work. I am your host, Shelley Roars, spokesperson for the League of Women Voters of the Pikes Peak region. Thank you for listening to Making Democracy Work, coming to you from the Studio 809 Community Podcast Studio at the Next Us, a professional cooperative environment for small businesses in downtown Colorado Springs. So thank you for taking time to learn more about being an active and engaged citizen. The League is a nonpartisan grassroots organization focusing on voter education and outreach, good government, and citizen education. Today's conversation falls under voter education. We invite all of the candidates on the upcoming ballot to be interviewed here on our podcast, and to avoid any bias or partisanship, our questions are similar for all of the candidates, local, state, national levels, and revolve around women's health and childcare, our environment, and homelessness and extreme poverty. So let's get to it. Our guest today is Michael Pierson, running as a Democrat for Colorado State House District 22. Welcome, Michael.
Well, thanks for having me, Shelley. And I appreciate the League of Women Voters for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you. So for our listeners, can you give us that 30-second elevator pitch introduction about you and why you're running for Colorado State House District 22?
Sure. Well, I'm Michael Pierson. I'm a husband, father, veteran, and volunteer. I served my country in the U.S. Air Force on active duty for 20 years as an officer and another 12 years as a civilian. And out of that sense of service, I want to serve the people of my district in House District 22. My values are respect for all, opportunity for all, and freedom for all. And I think I can represent my district really well. We've lived in the district for more than 15 years and really gotten to know everybody there. And I think I can be a better representative for them.
Okay. So jump right in. Let's tell us what sets you apart from your opponents.
Well, I think I've got a teamwork personality. My job in the Air Force was an area called public affairs, where a big part of my responsibility was working with local and state, county, civic leaders and elected officials to come together to find solutions to issues that popped up between usually a base where I was stationed, but a lot of times larger organizations too, like Air Force Space Command here, finding common ground in those situations with people. And so I've learned to work across party lines and differences and come to those solutions that I think that can help everybody. And that's what I think makes me a better candidate.
All right. So next question. Tell our listeners, what are your highest priorities for Colorado and our community?
Well, the issue that I keep hearing every time I talk to people as I go around the district is cost of living. I think that's pretty apparent to everybody with the presidential race going on, what everybody's talking about. Economics is a huge deal right now, and I'd like to do whatever I can to try to bring down the cost of living here in Colorado. That might mean tax breaks for really the people that need it the most. I think our working families are working harder than ever just to try to keep up. And a lot of the fees and taxes that we have probably could be lightened up, lighten the load for people who really do need it. Second of all, what I'm hearing is as Colorado Springs expands, that infrastructure and traffic are becoming huge issues here. And since Colorado is responsible for maintaining Powers Boulevard, which runs right down the east side of my district and really serves most of the people in my district, either getting to and from work or school, but the future improvements on Powers are not even on their strategic plan, which surprised me as I started looking into this. Now, there's two projects going on right now, but when I first got here in 2006, I remember being in a meeting with city officials, because the city still owned Powers at that point, about how bad the traffic was just getting on and off the base, and that we needed them to work on some solutions to that. So that was 2006. So we are doing math in my head here, years and years later for that, and they're now turning dirt on that airport powers project. So if we need to get on the planning stages right now to fix the intersections at Constitution and Dublin especially, to do the overpasses like we've seen in research in some of the areas up north. I think folks in my district deserve that kind of traffic flow, and really for safety and a lot of other reasons, the state needs to fix that. I'm also interested in simplifying laws, looking across the laws in Colorado. You shouldn't have to hire a lawyer to get through life. So there's some things that to me just don't make sense the way we regulate one thing versus another. Seem to be similar issues, similar products. Why are we regulating them differently? And I'd like to look into that to simplify things.
Okay. So let's assume you win. Choose one single issue that you would prioritize in the coming term and name it and describe what you want to accomplish.
Well, I think my priority issue is getting Powers Boulevard fixed. Okay. As I just was talking about, the traffic on there is just getting to be horrendous. We've got a major hospital in Penrose St. Francis Medical Center up there, and I've seen ambulances and fire trucks struggling to get up and down that road. And I think just practically for the people in my district, that's an issue that I could take on directly with CDOT and get them moving along on making the improvements that need to be made to Powers Boulevard.
Okay. All right. Again, let's assume you win. As a newcomer, tell us how you would keep from being a backbencher.
Yeah, that's the problem that my opponent, the incumbent, has right now. And the reason that he is a backbencher is because he's brought that upon himself, quite frankly. He has spent his term in office insulting people and tearing people down and basically making enemies in the legislature. And, government is a team sport. You have to learn to get along with people who don't see things your way. So what he's done is he's isolated himself. He's upset everybody up there. And so they have forced him into a corner. And because of that, he's only passed one bill in his entire time in the legislature. And that's not doing anybody any good. I'm going to work across the aisle. I'm going to work with people from both parties from all over this state and listen to them instead of talking at them. I'm certainly not going to insult them. Going to listen to what their issues are, where they're coming from, why things are important to them, and trying to find that middle ground that I think can help everyone in Colorado. And it's really about making people's lives better. I'm not going up there to champion any political cause up there. I'm just trying to make people's lives better.
Okay. All right. Let's go to those topic conversations that I mentioned in the introduction. What are your budget priorities, and how do they impact women and families in communities across our state?
Well, the great thing we have here in Colorado that we don't have at the federal level is a requirement that the state have a balanced budget. The governor has to present a balanced budget. When the legislature tears that apart and rebuilds it again and comes up with the budget for the next year, it has to be a balanced budget so that the tax money coming in has to equal the tax money going out. And I think that forces people, just like a family, it forces you to make hard decisions. The state is not allowed to go into debt. So that's where I think my budget priorities really lie with public safety, number one, and that for me is very broad. That's police and fire, but it's also first responders. Secondly is education for the state. I think almost all families here in Colorado are impacted by education, and certainly that sets the pace for our future. The children that we educate today are the leaders tomorrow. They're the people who are going to run for office and be our government leaders in the future. And we owe it to them to provide them with the best fact-based education that we can. And then third, I think the priority is healthcare. And that's multidisciplinary. I mean, there's so many different aspects of healthcare. But my wife is a nurse. My son is a chiropractor. So I'm very plugged in to what they go through on a day-to-day basis, from insurance and just access to healthcare and drugs that are available or not available, this healthcare plan. So it's really very difficult just to navigate life as far as just trying to take care of your family from day to day. So when you run into a healthcare issue, it becomes even more complex. And I'd like to look at some ways to simplify that for people. I'd like to try to get more people covered. by at least basic health care so that a little issue doesn't blow up into be a major issue. If we can treat somebody in a doctor's office instead of treating somebody in an ambulance or an ER, I think we're all better off. So I think that impacts families across Colorado, and I think that should be one less thing for people to stress about.
All right. Moving on to our environment, we as a society rely on the transportation sector for the movement of goods and people, but it is the largest contributor of global warming emissions in the country and our state, and a major source of harmful air pollution that contributes to serious public health issues. Black, Indigenous, people of color communities have been disproportionately affected by tailpipe pollutions from cars, trucks, and buses, and historic infrastructure choices such as highway construction have harmed many communities. What steps will you take to reduce emissions from transportation and ensure an equitable transportation system?
Yeah, I agree that our disadvantaged communities have taken the brunt of the impact over the years of transportation expansions, highways being built. And I grew up in the Midwest in Ohio, and there's just concrete everywhere. And you can easily see that most of those overpasses and highways run through historically Black neighborhoods in that part of the country. So I think that we really need to look at environmental impact as a health concern. I believe in global warming. I believe that climate change is driven by fossil fuel burning that humans have been doing here since the industrial age. And I think fossil fuels are still going to be part of the equation for us, probably for the next generation or two. So oil and gas production in Colorado needs to go on, but it needs to go on safely. And we demand that of every other business. We need to demand that of our oil and gas as well. I consider myself to be a progressive on this issue, and I think we need to move toward a future without burning carbon fuel. But it's more than carbon. I think we get stuck on that sometimes. If you just stand at a gas station with everybody's engines running, there's a lot of nasty stuff coming out of those tailpipes. So there's just a lot of things that we're breathing every day, and there's only so much atmosphere out there for us. And I've lived in parts of the world where they don't care about keeping the environment clean, and it really does wear you down just physically. That people are just trying to get through their days and fight every other health issue that's out there, with a lot of times with bad food and bad water and bad air, should not be something that we worry about. We've made so much progress in this country in just the time that I can remember. I remember my dad and I changing oil in his old Volkswagen and literally dumping the used oil down the sewer. And it was just common back then. We would burn trash in the backyard. There were plenty of houses with lead paint. We don't want to go back to those days. Nobody does. But I think we hesitate, and there's a section of the public that always pushes back on those changes that are meant to make our environment healthier. And I understand that it's expensive, and I don't certainly want to bankrupt anybody by laying on environmental standards that are just unattainable or that are just way too soon because the technology hasn't matured yet. But there's really good, mature technology right now that we should be taking advantage of and incorporating when we can.
All right. Moving on to homelessness and extreme poverty. Yeah. El Paso County had 928 homeless people in shelters and 347 people living on the streets at the winter point in time count from the Colorado Sun that was back in February 21st of 2024. We do know that there is a decreased one that's come out that's more summer numbers, but it is a little bit more recent on that. But our question is, how do you see faith-based organizations, non-governmental organizations, and our local, state, and federal government working together to help fight extreme poverty and homelessness? And how can we as private citizens play a role?
Yeah, I volunteer with Care and Share Food Bank. And one of the things that I've really come to realize is just how many people out there are just struggling day to day. And even if they're not experiencing homelessness, which is just tragic, they're struggling to put food on the table. They're making decisions about whether to buy drugs for that week or for that month, buy the medication they need versus feeding their family versus paying the rent or keeping the heat on. And I think the role that nonprofits and faith-based organizations like Care and Share, there's churches everywhere in this town and people who really do care about their fellow man and who want to reach out and help people. I think we need to avoid some of the overlap. And I've worked with some nonprofits who actually have in their charter that they don't do what somebody else in the community is doing. And I think that's wonderful. I have actually been to disaster locations. I spent more than a month on the ground in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, and I've seen just how much the nonprofit sector can bring to that disaster response. But homelessness is a disaster that's going on every day. And I think people can, they can give their time, they can give their money. I think a lot of it is just giving their patience, is giving people some grace that there are folks going through very difficult times. One of our friends, she was divorced, having health problems, was on welfare, was basically going from house to house, staying with people with her kids kind of thing. And she used government assistance, used nonprofit assistance to get herself on her feet, get herself through nursing school. And she's an RN now out in Nevada, just doing great. And so, people need that safety net. There will, I think, always be, and I've seen this all over the world, even in societies that have a complete 100% social welfare or social security net, there are still some people who live on the streets, and it's tragic to see. But I think for everybody else, especially those who are temporarily homeless, the folks who just need to get through another month's rent, that should be an easy fix, I think, for a society as rich as ours, that we can put more resources against helping those people who need it the most.
All right. So a couple of questions to round us out. In your opinion, what is the best indication of economic health? Is it the stock market, the unemployment rate, income? What does that look like to you?
I think what it looks like, I remember when I was young, I was talking to some people from different backgrounds about, how would you know when you're rich? You have that conversation when you're 20 kind of thing. How do you know when you're rich? And we all had different things. And my answer was when I forget it's payday. So you've got the economic security that you're not living paycheck to paycheck. I think that's economic stability for people, and that should be a foundation that everyone should be able to work for. Is that they have enough to cover an emergency, that they definitely have enough to cover the basics, the food, shelter, healthcare, transportation, those sort of things, and prosperity. We've got a society where you have a very small number of people who just have most of the resources in this society, and a large number of people at the bottom of that pyramid who are just trying to get by, who are just trying to survive. We are the richest country to have ever existed in the history of the world. And, from my military experience, I have seen just how many resources we can throw at a problem when we want to. And I think that's really what it comes down to, is the will to do that, to throw the resources that we have behind these issues that bother all of us every day.
Sure. All right. So final question for our listeners today. Is there anything that you want to say that we didn't touch upon?
Well, I think one of the great things that the League of Women Voters does is just get people to pay attention to how much politics, and that seems to be a dirty term with a lot of people, how much it affects our lives, how much it affects our children's future, how much it affects just the way that we live and the freedoms that we have. And I know people are just trying to get through their day. They're just trying to pick up the kids from school. They're trying to, get dinner on the table. They're trying to pay the bills for that month. So there's not too much headspace available to think about politics. But over the next few weeks here, we're coming up on a really important election this November. And I know there's been a lot of noise and a lot of controversy and a lot of arguing back and forth. But really, take some time. Just when you get your ballot, just give yourself a moment with your phone or a computer and just look up the candidates, look up the issues, think about really how you feel about these, cast a vote and get that back in. That's the way democracy works. If you don't, then other people get to make your choices for you. And nobody wants that. I've been all over the world and I've cleaned up after dictators. I've seen when it goes bad, and it's pretty bad. So we don't want to start sliding that way. We want to democracy is a participation sport. You can't stand on the sidelines and just let somebody else do it. So I encourage people to just put some time on your calendar, put it up there on the whiteboard, on the refrigerator or whatever, and say, I'm going to take a couple of hours on this day after I get my ballot, sometime after the 11th of October, and really sit down and do some research on the candidates and on the issues. And I hope that the folks in my district at least will do some research on me at Pierson4co.com and like what they see.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pierson, for your sacrifice and also for taking the time today to let us get to know you a bit more.
Great to be here.
You. We know it's hard putting your name out on that ballot, so thank you. In addition to Vote 411 and interviews here on our Making Democracy Work podcast, the League is hosting candidate forums in El Paso County for voters to learn more about those running for office on your November 5th ballot. Check out the event calendar on our website, lwvppr.org, for a detailed list of candidate forums and our ballot issues forum. Military ballots were to be mailed around September 21st, with the rest of our ballots mailed around October 11th. Your ballot must be returned by 7 p.m. on Tuesday, November 5th. Remember, the League is here if you have any questions. Thank you again for listening today and for educating yourself before you vote. Until next time, let's all try to do better.